You know, we often hear about the Buddha's enlightenment as this big, epic legend. But have you ever wondered what it was really like from his own perspective? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're jumping into a text called the Bodhirājakumārasutta, and it's amazing because it's the Buddha's own story of his, well, his intense, super difficult, and in the end, incredible journey to awakening.
So get this, the whole thing kicks off with this massive question: is true happiness achieved through suffering? And this wasn't just a random thought. It was the exact question a prince named Bodhi asked the Buddha. See, Bodhi was convinced, like a lot of people back then, that you had to go through hell to find heaven, basically. But the Buddha's answer? It wasn't a simple yes or no. Instead, he told his own story. And that's the story we're going to follow.
All right, Section 1, The Search Beyond Masters. So, the Buddha starts his story way back before he was the Buddha. He was what's called a bodhisattva, someone aiming for enlightenment. And here's the kicker. He started out believing the exact same thing as Prince Bodhi. He thought suffering was the key. And he was so driven by this idea that he walked away from everything, his palace, his family, a life of total comfort, all to find the ultimate truth.
His first move? Go learn from the absolute best. He wasn't just wandering in the woods hoping for an answer. Nope, he hunted down the most famous meditation teachers of his time. He ended up with two main guys, Alara Kalama and then Uddaka Ramaputta. And let me tell you, he was a natural, a total prodigy. He mastered everything they threw at him, like super quickly. And the states he reached, wow. These weren't your everyday mindfulness exercises. We're talking about reaching these incredibly deep levels of consciousness, like this sphere of nothingness, and then the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. I mean, back then, this was the spiritual Mount Everest. This was the top of the game. But even after reaching the peak, the Bodhisattva felt something wasn't right. It wasn't the final answer.
And this is where he had this huge aha moment. He realized, hey, this is amazing, this is blissful, but it's temporary. These states didn't lead to that permanent, unshakable peace he was looking for. They didn't solve the root problem of suffering. In his words, they were not nibbana. And so, with this incredible clarity, and you've got to admit, a lot of guts, he thanked his teachers and walked away to keep searching, all alone.
Okay, Section 2, the fire that wouldn't light. This next part is probably the bit you've heard about. He learned all he could from others, and it wasn't enough. So he decided to turn the experiment on himself, to push his own body and mind to the absolute breaking point. This kicked off 6 years of the most extreme self-denial you can imagine, a full-on battle with pain.
Yeah, this whole thing has a name in Pali, dukkara karika. It basically means the difficult, painful striving. And it came from this popular idea that if you punish your body, you can purify your soul, burn away all the bad stuff. The Bodhisattva didn't just dabble in this idea. He decided to take it to its absolute limit, to see if it was the real deal.
And when I say extreme, I mean it. The guy was relentless. He did things that sound, frankly, impossible. He would clench his teeth and press his tongue to the roof of his mouth, trying to literally crush his own thoughts. He practiced this non-breathing meditation, holding his breath until he felt these searing pains in his head, like someone was tightening a strap around it. And on top of all that, he basically stopped eating.
Now, in the middle of all this suffering, he has these three incredible insights, these three similes that just pop into his head. The first one is this. Imagine trying to start a fire with a piece of wood that's not only wet and sappy, but it's also sitting in a puddle of water. It's impossible, right? Well, he realized that's like a person whose mind is just drowning in worldly desires. You can rub those sticks together all day long, but that fire of wisdom is just not going to light. Okay, the second simile is a little more subtle, a little more clever. Now imagine you take that same wet, sappy piece of wood out of the water and put it on dry land. Can you start a fire? Still no. And this, he realized, is the person who's physically left the world behind, like he had, but inside, their mind is still wet with all that craving and attachment. So the outside looks good, but the inside is still not ready.
And then comes the third simile, the one that changes everything. It's only when you have a piece of wood that's dry and sapless, that's a mind free from craving, and it's on dry land, away from all the distractions, that you can finally strike a match and get a flame. Boom! Both the internal and the external conditions have to be right. For him, this was a totally mind-blowing insight. But man, this insight came at a huge price. His body was completely falling apart. The text itself is brutally honest about it. It says his limbs were like withered vines, his spine was like a string of beads, and you could see his ribs jutting out like the roof beams of a collapsed shed. He said if he touched his stomach, he could feel his own spine. It was then he had to face a hard truth. This path wasn't enlightenment. This was just death.
So let's get into section 3, awakening to the middle way. Okay, so at this point, he's basically tried everything. The life of luxury didn't work. The life of extreme pain didn't work. He'd proven both extremes were dead ends. So, what now? The answer, the big turning point, came from somewhere totally unexpected. A memory from when he was just a kid. And that memory held the key.
He suddenly remembered this one time when he was a little boy, just sitting under a rose apple tree. And with zero effort, no struggling at all, he just naturally slipped into this state of complete bliss and focus. It was peaceful, it was happy, and it was totally effortless. And this memory just lit up his mind, sparking a revolutionary idea. He asked himself a really powerful question. Why am I so afraid of a happiness that has nothing to do with sensual pleasure or doing bad things? For 6 years, he'd been treating all pleasure like it was poison. But this memory showed him there was another kind of happiness, a clean, wholesome happiness that wasn't a problem. Actually, it was the perfect fuel for real insight, and he realized, I shouldn't be running from this, I should be running towards it.
And with that, he made a huge decision. He gave up the extreme practices and accepted a meal of rice and milk to get his strength back. Now, the 5 guys who'd been with him this whole time, they were horrified. They thought he'd quit, that he'd given up the fight and gone soft. They just up and left him. But what looked like failure to them was actually the real start of his final push to enlightenment. So, with some food in his system and his mind settled in that state of wholesome bliss, he sat down under the now famous Bodhi tree. And that night, his mind, which was finally clear and strong, unlocked 3 massive insights. In the first part of the night, he remembered all of his own past lives. Then, in the middle of the night, he saw how all beings, everyone, rise and fall based on their karma. And finally, just before dawn, he sought the root cause of all suffering and exactly how to end it for good. At that moment, he wasn't the Bodhisattva anymore. He was the Buddha, the one who woke up.
You'd think that's the end of the story, right? But it's not. He'd reached the ultimate goal for himself, but now a whole new problem came up. He'd found the way out, but could he actually teach it to anyone else? Would anyone even get it? And this led to a pretty serious moment of doubt.
See, the Buddha thought to himself, this thing I've realized, it's deep. It's really hard to see. He felt it, went against the stream. Completely opposite to how most people think, which is all about chasing desires. He was worried that a world obsessed with wanting more just wouldn't understand him, and that trying to teach would just be exhausting.
And right at that moment of hesitation, a deity named Brahma Sahempati shows up, and he begs the Buddha, please, please teach. He makes the point that, yeah, a lot of people are lost, but there are some folks out there who have just a little dust in their eyes. They're ready. They could understand if someone just showed them the way. That appeal to compassion did the trick. The Buddha agreed. He would teach.
Okay, section 5, the 5 keys to learning. And this brings us right back to where we started with Prince Bodhi's question. After telling this entire incredible story, the Buddha finally gives him his answer. And it's not some complicated philosophy. It's a super practical checklist. 5 things anyone needs to succeed at anything difficult.
And here they are, the 5 keys. First, you need saddha, basically faith or conviction that what you're doing is possible. Second, apabado, good health. I mean, that's a lesson straight from his own story, right? Third, asato, you got to be honest and sincere, no faking it. Fourth is arada wiryo. You need energy, you need grit, you need to stick with it. And finally, number 5, panyava, wisdom, the ability to see things clearly, just as they are. These, the Buddha said, are what really matter. So when you boil it all down, the big lesson from the Buddha's own life is this. Real success isn't about who can suffer the most. It's not about brute force. It's about skill. It's about balance. It's about creating the right conditions for success, inside and out. A healthy body, an honest approach, relentless energy, and clear-eyed wisdom. That's the middle way.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? We all have challenges in our lives where maybe we're pushing way too hard, burning ourselves out, or maybe we're being too lazy, not pushing enough. So think about a challenge you're facing right now. Where in that struggle could you apply a middle way? Where could you find that skillful, wise balance?